In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to draw a three-dimensional inverted cross. The only supplies you should need for this drawing are a pencil and maybe a ruler, and I'll also be using a pen. As always, feel free to tag the show in your drawings at Dark Art TV. I'll start the first inverted cross by drawing a rectangle wider than it is tall. To center the other rectangle, I'll draw a line straight down the middle to find the center, and repeat the width of the first rectangle on the second. There are a million ways to draw almost anything, even as simple as something like this, so just have fun practicing your own inverted crosses sometime. Next, do your best to draw an exact replica of the cross you just drew, but position it 45 degrees up and to the right of the first one. After you've drawn both inverted crosses, find all of the corners of the intersecting lines made from the first drawing and connect them to their matching respective corners on the second. All of your lines should be roughly 45 degrees in parallel. If this becomes inconsistent, it can make your drawing start to look very disproportionate, like if Tim Burton decided to start making inverted crosses. You can draw lines all the way through your crosses, but I chose to leave them out of the foreground shape, so that the lines leading away from the corners and edges appear as if they are behind it. This part can be tricky, but a little attention and a steady hand and you can start to learn this 3D technique pretty easily. Draw an outline around the foreground shape and all of the 45-degree connecting lines. Don't outline the background shape entirely, and just mimic the corners and edges you see as if the drawing were a solid image. After you've connected all the lines, you should be left with an inverted cross that appears to be popping up from the page. For the second example, I'll be using a technique called perspective. I'll define the first plane by making a line that will be the bottom of the drawing. Then I'll find the center of that line and make a dot above to serve as the second perspective point. The dot is on the horizon line and will be the target for any of my vertical lines. Next, place two dots on either side of the first vertical line, equidistant from the middle. Get a good idea of where you want the crossbeam for your inverted cross and make a line parallel with the bottom horizontal line, about a third of the way up from the median line. Find equidistant points from the middle line again and connect them to the horizon point. If you've done that correctly, then you will have the correct perspectives for each side of the crossbeam and you can make another line above that to define the width. Draw some short vertical lines downward from the 4 points you made and try to make them all about the same length. Finish off your inverted cross by drawing horizontal lines across the width, again hiding the lines behind the foreground shape. The third example is very similar to the second, but instead of the cross laying on its back, this one will be standing straight up, which is the best way to orient a cross if you're going to crucify a fictional biblical character. Start this cross by drawing 2 vertical parallel lines for the width of the support beam. Place a dot decently far away from your lines and as close to centered as possible. Next, draw a triangle forming from the endpoints of the line on the right and the perspective point. Find a point on the right line, about a third of the way from the bottom, and connect it to the perspective point. Do the same with a line right above it, creating a similar width from the vertical lines. After you've made your horizontal lines, you can finish them off by drawing vertical lines as the end caps. Try to make the end cap line that is closest to the perspective point a little closer to the cross, and the end cap on the opposite side just slightly farther away from the support beam. This will give the illusion of perspective. The last steps are almost identical to the first 2 steps, in which you'll be drawing parallel lines from the corners of your inverted cross to signify the depth, then drawing the more vertical lines behind the foreground shape to define it. The fourth example I'll show you starts exactly like the first one. 2 flat inverted crosses connected at 45 degrees by their corners. This should give you a second chance to practice that version a few times. Now you're going to draw an outline on the inside of the foreground cross, doing your best to make the lines straight and consistent, as I have failed to do in this example. This part is a little more advanced, but if you've followed along pretty well up until now, it should be no problem after a few tries. Draw 45-degree lines in the same direction as the background cross. originating from the inside corners of the interior outline you just drew. You can make these lines long to make the cross appear as if it's one long piece, or you can shorten them a bit and make it look a little more interesting. The connecting lines on the inside can be a little tough, but a little practice makes things a lot easier. I think the inverted cross is interesting in the world of Satan, because it's one of the only satanic icons to come directly from the Bible. An artist friend of mine, Ashamadeva, actually wrote some thoughts on the subject that I think make a lot of sense. The cross of St. Peter is technically a Christian symbol, one and of itself a rebellion. St. Peter refused to be crucified right side up, instead to be inverted, a gesture of his lesser value to Jesus. Today, this symbol has been usurped and used by the satanic community as a statement of blasphemy, mockery, dissent, and utter rejection of Christianity. The deliberate inverted use has persisted across a wide spectrum of popular society, from Satanists to metal bands to horror movies, assuring an immediate connotation to evil. While modern Satanists are not evil, we are almost always interpreted via these kinds of correlations. I have more than once been told by modern Satanists that an inverted cross is an amateur reflection of Satanism and not worthy of our usage or adornment. Personally, I disagree. I see a right side up cross as the most widely understood symbol in all the world. When anyone flips it over, the blasphemous and derogatory connotations are immediate. Thanks for following along with a bit more advanced tutorial. As always, feel free to watch the steps a few more times if you need to, and just have fun learning how to try. And of course, if you make a drawing you're proud of, tag the show in a picture at Dark Art TV.